If you keep handing somebody brass knuckles and they punch somebody in the face with them, at some point, it's hard to say you're not involved in the fist fight too. If you hand somebody a gun and they shoot somebody, you get charged with a crime here in America. We are fighting. We're just trying to claim that we aren't. And I think Biden's continued embrace of Ukraine, both highly suspicious and highly troubling. I talked earlier about we live in, I believe, the most artificial media era of any of our lives, where everything is so scripted and inauthentic that it makes it, you're smarter if you immediately, anytime a story happens, presume that you're only being told a fraction of the truth. And I thought about this as I watched some of the clips of Joe Biden in Ukraine. And this one in particular, as he's laying a wreath, suddenly an air raid siren goes off. There's no actual danger of air raids at all in Kyiv. And I just want to play this cut for you because it felt like it was so artificially manufactured and scripted to try and fulfill the narrative of the extreme danger that Joe Biden is undertaking that you needed to hear it. Listen to this. Okay, the air raid siren, again, the video will play it out even more for you, but it's just, to me, fundamentally artificial. There was no need for the air raid siren. Somebody hit the clip because they wanted to have that on video, and they wanted to stage it probably for Joe Biden propaganda-related materials. And it's not a surprise that while we have focused here on this program, the fact that many different parts of the United States are suffering, in particular the southern border, certainly the people in East Palestine, Ohio, that could use the president's attention. Instead, Joe Biden went to Ukraine to focus attention more on Ukrainian borders, and he is being praised and said, this is like JFK, this is like Reagan. This is what they're saying. This is MSNBC's Rick Stengel comparing Biden to JFK and Reagan.
I think it's historic. It's like when JFK went to Berlin in 1963, when Ronald Reagan went to West Berlin in 1987 and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. It sent a powerful message to Moscow that we are there to stay, a powerful message to our European NATO allies that we're there, that an American president went into a war zone without American troops on the ground. I think it's powerful.
I think it's not powerful at all. And the most interesting thing that he said there, inadvertently, is he went into a war zone where there's no American troops, boots on the ground. And this goes with the argument that I made in the first hour. We are continuing to see a relatively slow slog towards World War III. We've got the American president committing $100 billion to Ukraine, tanks, maybe fighter jets soon, walking around in Ukraine and sending the message that America is a default combatant in this war. And the question that I asked for you earlier, I just want all of you to think about as we go into this break and get ready for the third hour of the program. If American troops were dying, and there are reports that 60,000 Russians have died, and they were dying because of the materials being provided by a United States adversary, their tanks, their missiles, their bombs. Would you sit back and be like, oh, they're just providing all the missiles, bombs, tanks, fighter jets to kill Americans with? They're not really doing it? Or would you sit around and say, wait a minute, they are killing Americans. We've got to do something about it. And why would you expect Russia to do less? We started off the program talking about the incredible disconnect between Joe Biden's focus on the Ukrainian border, while ignoring, by and large, what is going on at our own southern border. And I asked the question, how would you like to have seen $100 billion of your taxpayer dollars spent? Would you have rather that money gone to protect Americans and our southern border, or would you rather have spent $100 billion on Ukraine? And I asked the larger question, by the way, let me look at the exact most recent number here so I get it 100% right. But somewhere around 95% of you with 20,000 votes cast said, you know what? I'd rather have the money spent on the United States border. 94% of you with right at 20,000 votes cast in the first hour or so of that vote being up. Right at 94% of you are saying you'd rather see the $100 billion spent here. And then as we were going to break, I was asking you to think about a question. How would we react if 60,000, because that's the latest number, 60,000 Russian soldiers had been killed and 200,000 had been killed or wounded, and much of the both killing and the maiming, the wounding that is going on was being done by a foreign adversary providing all that money? Well, one way to think about it is this is why Trump killed Soleimani in Iraq as he was traveling from Iran, because the Iranians were helping to fund the weapons that were being used to kill and maim American soldiers in Iraq. And Trump said, we're not going to stand for that anymore. We're going to defend United States troops, even though Iran is not directly necessarily causing those deaths. They're providing all the weapons that are leading to those deaths. And so something that I would ask all of you to think about, as it feels to me like we inch closer and closer every day to a major global conflagration that could potentially lead to World War III, how would we react in America right now if 60,000 Americans were dead and 200,000 Americans were wounded, and one of our foreign adversaries, let's say it was Russia, China, or Iran, just to pick three, if they said, oh, tough break, America, well, we didn't have anything to do with that. And we said, wait a minute, all the 60,000 Americans and the 200,000 woundings, all of that was occurring because you guys, Iran, China, or Russia, had provided the materials, the weapons that allowed that to occur. Would we consider those countries to be non-combatants? I think the answer is no. And the reason why I bring it up is, imagine that you're in Russia right now. Let's leave aside whether you even care about the legitimacy of the war itself, but rather you're just dealing with those casualties, 60,000 dead, 200,000 wounded. What percentage of those deaths and of those injuries in combat are directly related to American combat materials? Guns, bombs, maybe soon fighter jets, but in the meantime, tanks. A third, a quarter, a half, maybe higher. Wouldn't you consider, if you were Russia, the United States to be a combatant in this battlefield right now? And again, take it outside of Russia if it makes it easier, and just presume that the United States was engaged in military action. 60,000 of our troops were dead, 200,000 had been wounded or killed. And Iran, China, or Russia had provided the war weaponry that allowed that to occur. Wouldn't we all consider them to be enemy combatants? Would it make a big difference to us who was actually pulling the trigger if they had given $100 billion in assets that allowed 60,000 of our troops to be dead? I'm going to be honest with you. I would consider Russia or Iran or China to be combatants in that scenario. And then imagine if their head of state traveled to that battleground and spent the day bragging about how much of an ally they were with the country that had been killing us. How would you respond? I'm just going to be honest with you. again, I think a big part of contemplating where things are going is taking it outside of the American mindset and thinking about it from the Russian mindset. Wouldn't you be out for blood if you were Russia? Wouldn't you be trying to figure any way out that you could with your Iranian and Chinese allies to extract pain on the United States for what we're doing? Because make no mistake, what Joe Biden is trying to argue right now is, oh, we're not involved. We don't have boots on the ground. But that line of what classifies as involvement keeps moving closer and closer to boots on the ground. And I'm not trying to defend Russia in any way. I'm just asking you to think as an American how you would want to respond if this situation was occurring to America. You'd want to F up, sorry, the phrasing there. You'd want to F up Russia. You'd want to F up China. You'd want to F up Iran. We know because Trump did it when he killed Soleimani based on them providing the materials that allowed Americans to be killed. Well, when we're giving $100 billion to Ukraine to kill Russians, I got to be honest with you. That's a level of culpability to me that makes America officially, I think at this point, probably for months now, an actual combatant in this battle, even if we aren't providing yet troops on the ground. And given the fact that we're now in a quagmire and we've got Joe Biden walking around in Ukraine, it feels to me like every single day it becomes closer and closer to the United States being directly involved in this battle. And if you're Russia and you're reaching out to China and you're reaching out to Iran and you are saying you hate the United States, the way to get back at the United States is to stand with us against Ukraine, at what point does this become a larger battlefield? Are we already there? And are we setting ourselves up to be attacked in some way because of our increasing involvement there? And frankly, what I think is a cocky move by Joe Biden to go show up in Ukraine. Now, I think it's misguided because I care about America and our borders way more than I do Ukraine, but I just want all of you out there to think about how you would respond. I used to do this test because I think it's so important. When I would do sports talk radio, there were always scandals, and what I found was overwhelmingly people would defend whatever their favorite team or their favorite player did, and it didn't matter at all what the details were. And so I would say, okay. Instead of Ohio State doing it, pretend that Michigan did it. How would you respond? And they'll be like, well, that's totally different. Well, why is it totally different? Well, because I hate Ohio. I hate Ohio State. I'm a Michigan fan. Or I hate Michigan. I'm an Ohio State fan. So pretend that what is happening to Russia right now is happening to the United States. 60,000 dead, 200,000 wounded, most recent estimates. And all of it was being done based on Russian military support. Would you really care who was pulling the trigger? Or would you say, I want revenge, I'm out for blood, they're killing my compatriots? I think we have to be prepared. I'm just saying. I think we have to be prepared at some point in the near future, this is my prediction, for Russia to strike back at us through either Iran or China to send a message that we have crossed over from neutral party to direct combatant. I don't know what that will look like. I don't know what that will entail. All I know is that's what we would do in this scenario. And that's why I expect at some point Russia may well do it. So, if that happens, what is the American response? Probably going to be what it's already been. Every single day we get a little bit closer to being direct combatants in Ukraine. And every single day, East Palestine, nobody cares. Southern border, tens of thousands of people coming across. So bad the northern border is now falling apart. Remember, if you keep in mind my general thesis that everything Joe Biden touches turns to crap, it's the Bidas touch. Things are about to get, I think, far worse in terms of what's going on in Ukraine. And you can understand why Russia would be reaching out and seeking allies among people who hate America because they believe that we have entered into a direct war with them, and we're pretending that we're not. If you keep handing somebody brass knuckles and they punch somebody in the face with them, at some point, it's hard to say you're not involved in the fist fight too. If you hand somebody a gun and they shoot somebody, you get charged with a crime here in America. We are fighting. We're just trying to claim that we aren't. And I think Biden's continued embrace of Ukraine, both highly suspicious and highly troubling for what it means going forward in the U.S. I think this is going to get messy, and I think it's going to get messy even more so very soon.